If you've ever had a psychedelic hallucination, you know that your subjective experience is constructed by your brain. My own most vivid memory of that was my first time on mushrooms, appropriately at Burning Man. My friend who brought the mushrooms, her face appeared to be dotted with extra eyeballs, like 20 of them, all staring and blinking at me. Obviously, my perception was an error, but the hallucination showed me something very important. Not about the drug, but about my experience. What I learned is that what I see when I open my eyes is not the real world. Rather, what is in my perception is actually a construction, a simulation built by my brain. Clearly, when my brain added all those extra eyeballs to my friend's face, it was making some serious mistakes. I mean, of course. My perception of my friend's face was clearly misconstructed. But, and this is the part that blew my mind, that also means that all of normal perception is likewise constructed. My brain didn't just build a weird experience for me on psilocybin. It is always building my perception. I should probably quickly make a distinction between the words perception and sensation. Sensation is the neural signal. Some remote sensing neuron, whether in the skin or the nose, on the tongue or in the ear canal or wherever, that neuron is activated by some stimulus and sends its signal to the brain. Sensation. Once at the brain, that signal is decoded by the relevant brain part where its information may feed other brain processes, like behavior. Perception, by contrast, is this simulation I'm talking about, this construct. Perception is clearly informed by sensation, at least during waking hours, but as the mushroom trip showed me, the simulation isn't always faithful in its reproduction. And not all sensation ends up in perception. For example, if you're driving your car while having a conversation with your friend, as long as the driving is going well, you're probably experiencing more perception of the conversation than you are of the driving, even though the driving is the more dangerous part. You're wrapped up in that conversation, and the driving seems to be almost automatic. However, your brain is receiving all kinds of sensation about the road and is using that sensation to motivate behavior. Steering, using the turn signals, braking, etc. But neither the sensation nor the behavior is very well represented within perception. Perception instead includes mostly just the conversation. And don't get me wrong, if the drive suddenly became problematic, then your perception would quickly shift over. You would suddenly become very aware of the road, and the conversation would disappear. Boop. Your brain tries to represent the most important things that are happening right now within subjective experience, and it leaves a lot of the lesser information out. Your perception even intentionally leaves out the one thing that your eyes, and thus your brain, sees the most, which is your nose. Your nose is within your field of visual sensation all the time. If you look, there it is. You can also see your eyelashes. And if you wear glasses, you know they dominate your vision. But your experience generator tends to leave all that out. Most of the time, it's as if your nose and eyeglasses and eyelashes aren't there at all. So, perception represents not everything that's going on, but only what's important to your brain at any particular moment in time. And it isn't even necessarily about what's actually happening in the outside world. For example, think about your subjective experience while you're reading a fascinating novel. Yes, you do perceive the words on the page, black letters on white paper, but that perception tends to be a relatively unimportant part of your experience, just like the driving was. What's really important about the experience of reading a novel is what your imagination adds. You feel the character's emotions. You see what the author describes. You add the qualities of color and texture and even taste and smell and pain to this inner movie you make in your head. So, if we want to explain subjective experience, we also have to explain this inner movie, this mind's eye. We need to find a mechanism in the brain that would turn sensations into perceptions, plus it needs to feature the fruits of our imagination. Not only reading a book, but also having a daydream, or solving problems in our heads, like making plans, or imagining a conversation with my girlfriend. All of these mental simulations end up as part of the bigger simulation of experience. Also, memory recall seems to happen within subjective experience. You perceive your memories. You can see the old views and you feel the old feels. You can even smell and taste your memories. All of these functions of perception, imagination, and memory are part of my subjective experience and have to be explained by the mechanism that creates it. And what about awareness? Awareness and subjective experience seem to be roughly the same things, right? We say that we are aware of things once they have entered our subjective experience. But consider baseball players. In today's professional baseball, the pitches have gotten so fast that players can no longer rely on perceiving the throw. The batters are swinging before they perceive the ball coming at them. So, are the players aware of the ball when they're swinging? If you ask them, they say no. They haven't seen it. As far as they're concerned, they're using the friggin' force. They swing when it feels right and trust that some part of their brain has made the right decision. What's happening? It's these parallel systems, sensation versus perception, which work on different time scales. Sensation, which again is the neural signal, can immediately drive behavior within a couple hundred milliseconds, including hitting a baseball. Perception, by contrast, is a slower system, which combines all the senses together. Sensation can cause in the brain a cascade of neural processing, and that cascade of processing can lead quickly to behavior, but only eventually to perception. And what we call awareness only seems to happen at this late perception stage. Through careful experiments, scientists have shown that there is a substantial delay in our awareness of stimuli, not only from the outside world, but also stimuli directly applied to the surface of our brains. Like many neurosurgeons, Dr. Benjamin Libet performed operations on awake open brain patients. Why? Because there's little pain and because it's important to get the patient's feedback throughout the surgery. You never want to cut too deep. For that reason, Libet was able to perform some very interesting experiments with consent upon his patients. Libet stimulated part of a subject's somatosensory cortex, which elicited a phantom perception in one of the subject's limbs. Through careful timing, Libet found that there was approximately a half second between when he stimulated the brain region and when the subject became aware of that stimulation, which seems like a long time because he was stimulating the actual brain. Libet didn't stop there. His surgical timing experiments led to even more famous timing experiments that Libet conducted with ordinary subjects. These experiments have been replicated over and over by scientists all around the world with the same result, which is our awareness of what's going on in our own minds always comes late. In the experiment, Libet's subjects were placed in front of a very precise clock, which could allow them to report within millisecond accuracy upon exactly when they made a simple motor decision: move a finger. These subjects also had electroencephalographs, EEGs, on their scalps, detecting the brain activity associated with motor decisions. So, Libet was able to compare the measured brain decision with the reported mind decision. And the mind decision was always late. The brain makes choices, causing a neural cascade, at the end of which is the perception of mind. This thing which I feel as my will to move my finger, that thing is just a part of the construct of subjective experience. And think about the other components of what we call mind. We think in words. We imagine in images, in tastes and smells, the kinds of qualities you expect to find in ordinary perception. Our imaginations and our thought processes echo the way we exist in the physical world. But that, of course, is not how our brains work. Our brain regions don't talk to each other in English or in any other human language. Our brain regions talk to each other, roughly speaking, in spike trains, nested within gamma waves. That's like super Morse code for brain communication. So, we see in every situation that our brain is doing its thing, under the surface, in its own language, making everything happen. And just one of the many things that our brain does is to create subjective experience. This subjective experience is a construct, basically a movie, a streaming 3D VR movie of a mind/body, which collectively I call me, interacting with a physical world. This movie is always from this one point of view and includes all the aspects of me, like thoughts and emotions and body perceptions. And even though it's a construct of my brain, this experience movie leaves out most of what my brain does. Perception leaves out all the spike trains, all the gamma waves. I have no idea what a gamma wave feels like. My brain evidently doesn't want the experience movie to be crowded with my brain's own processing. It wants this experience to be about the world, my body, and my thoughts and feelings. In non-psychedelic, non-experimental, non-surgical life, we don't tend to notice or care much about time delays or the difference between sensation and perception. It's only when we're altered in some radical way, like substance or fatigue or pathology, where we can really witness the breakdown. One relatively terrifying example of this is a class of disorders called parasomnias. These include sleep talking, sleepwalking, and this is where it gets really freaky, sleep driving. There is even a documented case of a man sleep driving to his in-laws' house and sleep murdering them. Now, this is not only very creepy, but it also defies everything we think we know about being quote-unquote unconscious. Isn't unconsciousness defined by immobility, by non-responsiveness? One cannot sleep drive without at least somehow sensing the road and making decisions. Some parts of the driver's brain had to have been responsive, while other parts were clearly offline. This is part of why I'm not a big fan of the words conscious, unconscious, or consciousness. Those words have been around for a very long time and have been used in wildly different contexts. Consciousness can mean awareness or wakefulness or the ability to respond or self-reflection or even something like a mind or a self. That word has become encrusted with meanings that are sometimes contradictory, at least as we see in the edge cases. Like, for example, we have locked-in patients who are aware but who are utterly non-responsive. We have neglect patients who sometimes can respond to sensation behaviorally but cannot become aware of those sensations. And of course, we all have dreams. In dreams, we seem to be aware. We seem to be having experiences. We can remember them and report on them later. But clearly, we are not, quote-unquote, conscious when we're dreaming. I believe the word consciousness is too imprecise to be useful. It just does not map well onto any known brain region or network. That's because the concept is just too broad. It drags in all these various functions and aspects of normal wakefulness and mistakenly declares them all to be one function, consciousness. We do know about the central nodes and networks of many of these functions. For example, arousal is associated with the brainstem, reportability with the inferior prefrontal cortex, behavior with the premotor cortex, self-reflection with the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, etc. These functions barely overlap in the brain. They are not one thing. Tradition has taken all these functions of wakefulness and lumped them together as one function, consciousness. And frankly, I think that is exactly why science has had such a hard time explaining quote-unquote consciousness. Because there is no such thing. As the title implies, this podcast is specifically about subjective experience and how that is constructed by the brain. There is no attempt here to explain responsiveness or the opposite of coma. Those other implications of the word consciousness belong to other brain networks and are at most peripheral in the function or explanation of subjective experience. So, what could explain subjective experience? Where, how, and why does it happen in the brain? Anatomically, what would we look for? Well, perception unites all the senses, so we should look for some kind of hub in the brain, a place where data streams from all the senses come together. And at this hub, we should find a brain structure where those data streams are organized and bound together into a comprehensive, unified experience. This experience generator should not only turn all the sensory data into perception, but it should also include the fruits of our imagination, like fantasies, and thinking about what goes on in other people's heads. It should be the mind's eye. This experience generator should also be in charge of reconstructing old memories, so that when I recall a past event, I don't just think about it, I re-experience it. This experience generator should be able to broadcast its VR movie to inform all parts of the brain about this new experience, so that all brain parts can simultaneously become aware of what's in it. This experience generator should even be able to generate dreams as well. And, as a matter of fact, we do know of such a place in the brain. This brain region receives data from all over, including all the senses, data about the world and about the body. It even receives information about the mind and assists in creating mental simulations, like planning, daydreaming, and memory recall. This one central region unites data from all over the brain, and it builds that data into one comprehensive, unified experience. It's even where dreams happen. This region is the center of episodic memory in the brain, the hippocampal complex. Now, there is a well-worn dogma in the consciousness community that the hippocampus cannot be the center of consciousness. And the reason why is simple. It's because we have many patients with fully removed hippocampi. And those patients are clearly, quote-unquote, fully conscious. That is, they talk, they choose, they engage, they behave. They can't remember, or not for very long, but they sure don't seem to be unconscious. And that dogma is right. The hippocampus is not the center of quote-unquote consciousness. That is, if by consciousness we mean a singular function that encompasses awareness plus responsiveness plus reflection plus wakefulness, then that singular function of consciousness could not possibly rely upon the hippocampus. These patients have proven that. But that's not what I'm arguing here. I am not trying to explain quote-unquote the center of consciousness. Because, as I have explained, I believe there is no such thing. The word consciousness refers to many separate functions, and they each have their own centers, their own networks. My goal is to explain only this one aspect of what has historically been called consciousness, which is subjective experience. It is only the tradition of the word consciousness that causes subjective experience to be so fiercely entangled with functions like responsiveness or the opposite of coma, etc. One would not expect something like responsiveness to be reliant upon the hippocampus, because the hippocampus generates memories, not behavior. But one would expect the hippocampus to be linked to experiences, because memories, after all, are experiences. Normally, we only think about memories when they're already kinda old. We only think about them when we remember them. But of course, our brains are generating brand new memories all the time, at least while awake. The episodic memory system is like the brain's security camera system. The bank doesn't know when it's going to be robbed, so all the security cameras are recording all the time, just in case. Likewise, The brain doesn't know when something interesting and memorable will happen. When will a predator leap out from behind a tree? So the brain leaves its recording system on just about all the time, at least during waking, just in case. If the recording system was off during an event, like it is when we're asleep, then there is no recording, and hence no way to remember the event. Subjective experience is that security camera footage. It is that brand new memory. Of course, when you recall memories, they tend to be watered down, missing most of the vivid detail. But subjective experience is the opposite of that. And for the same reason as the security camera example, the episodic memory system doesn't know which sense is about to be important. Will a smell grab my attention, or a loud noise, or a movement out of the corner of my eye? So a new memory's initial recording is rich and full of detail, just in case. But detail takes up data space, and the brain has limitations on data space that our bank security system does not. So instead, to save space on memories, the brain quickly reduces a memory down to its gist, to the moments and details that seemed important at the time. If no predator jumped from behind the tree, then that specific tree is probably quickly forgotten. Only the forest remains in memory. The memory that is made now is made primarily for the sake of the future brain. Those memories help the future brain learn from its past mistakes and successes. Since the memory is made for the future brain, it isn't part of the immediate behavior processing chain. That's why baseball players don't need memory/perception before swinging at the ball, because sensation and memory are parallel systems running in tandem. And the reason why Benjamin Libet's subjects were delayed in their awareness, either in making a decision or having their brains stimulated, is because of the extra time it takes for brain information to make it to the hippocampus and become incorporated in the next moment's new memory. The reason why awareness happens simultaneous to subjective experience is because the hippocampus provides the only global, united information source in the brain about what's happening right now. There's lots of other communication happening between brain regions, so patients without hippocampi can still perform relatively normally. What they're missing is just the big picture. Those of us who do have the big picture have access to only that. As someone with a working hippocampus, I can never be aware of something until it's part of the new memory. When it comes to awareness, the hippocampus acts like the news media outlet of the brain. Since it's the news, it only includes what's newsworthy. That's why we don't see our own noses and eyelashes, because they stopped being newsworthy to the brain a long time ago. That's also why a persistent smell or an air conditioner hum quickly fades in perception. We forget the feeling of our clothes shortly after we put them on. These sensations lose their newsworthiness and are no longer represented within perception. The news station of the hippocampus receives live updates that are sent in from all over the brain and stitches those updates into one master news program, the new memory, which then broadcasts back to the rest of the brain to tell everybody this is the big picture. This is what just happened. It's a bit like North Korean state television. Every part of the brain is doing its own thing, working on its own part of the task, but also every part of the brain is watching the same channel. The immediate broadcast of the new memory helps all brain regions to unify behind one common story. The story of being me. I like to think that I have a brain, but the opposite is true. My brain has me. There are, roughly speaking, thinking networks in the brain, and there are feeling networks, there are choosing networks, and imagining networks. None of these networks individually equals me, but when their neural cascades are all combined within memory, the being that is simulated feels exactly like me. For the needs of future recall, new memories are formed, complete with a unified self, me, seeming to perceive, seeming to have experiences, and seeming to become aware of things. But why? Like everything with memories, the self in memory is there mostly to help the future brain learn. How did I feel during the past event? What decisions did I make? When did I become aware of that predator? And of course, when I'm talking about the self in memory, I am talking about me. What I experience as the world is part of this new memory. And what I experience as myself is also just part of the new memory. And when I dream, I seem to be real. I seem to be behaving and having experiences. But clearly, the me in the dream is fictional, living a fictional life. That dream me may even be an entirely different character. It may not resemble me at all. So, what about when I'm awake? Awake subjective experience is essentially the same kind of hippocampal movie as a dream. The main difference is our waking dream is constrained by what's actually going on in the world, constrained by the input of our senses and the reality check of our prefrontal cortex. But it is also constructed with a lot of assumptions built in and a lot of details left out. What I experience as myself is based upon a true story, but it is always only part of this waking dream. So, this is probably where it starts to feel weird. If the self is just a construct of memory, a dream character, then who in the world am I? And if the perception that I call my will is actually an after-the-fact construct, as Libet showed it was, then what is it that I'm actually doing when I'm willing things? Am I doing anything at all? Am I in the driver's seat? Or is it possible that I don't even exist at all? given what we know about the brain, then who am I? Speaking of who am I, I'm Matt Faw, co-author with my dad, Bill Faw, of the peer-reviewed theory paper titled Neurotypical Subjective Experience is Caused by a Hippocampal Simulation, published by the journal Wire's Cognitive Science. Links to the paper, to a transcript of this podcast, and to an FAQ are all available at our website, consciousnessdoc, as in documentary.com. The theory is called EMOS, the episodic memory model of subjective experience. The site is consciousnessdoc.com. And once again, I'm Matt Faw. I'm dedicating this podcast to the memory of my friend, Dr. Ralph Pater Barrent. Please share this with someone you think will enjoy it.
Podcast copyright Stickman Films. Music license from Envato Elements.